This man is abnormal. He keeps a man-eating monster at home. He'll take anyone who upsets him home to feed the monster. The man's name is Shangjin. He's a convenience store clerk. Today he met such an unlucky guy. He bought $200 worth of stuff to save 20 cents on plastic bags. So he started complaining about Shangjin to the owner in the name of a regular customer. Said he was a little brat who didn't know the rules. He even accused Shangjin on the phone in front of Shangjin. Finally, Shangjin was scolded by the boss. There is nothing be done. Shangjin finally chose to hold her tongue. But when the man left, he greeted Shangjin's mom. Shangjin can't help it. When the evening shift came, he rushes out of the store. Since he lives in the same neighborhood as the man he just saw, Shangjin soon found his hardware store. At once Shangjin has an idea. He pretended to come to buy a light bulb. Said the lights in the house were out. But the man immediately told Shangjin to get lost. It means it's closed. Won't sell anything to Shangjin. Seeing this, Shangjin continued, older brother. Actually, I'm not very good at changing light bulbs. If you could come to my house and help me change a light bulb, I can give you another $300 for the installation. The man changed his attitude immediately after hearing that. After a brief chat, he grabbed his tools and was ready to help Shangjin. Soon the man was taken back to Shangjin's home. As soon as he enters the door, the man sees a plastic bag in the corner. There's still blood on the bag. And there's a foul odor. But for $300, the man didn't care this. Following Shangjin's instructions, the man comes to a bedroom. Because it's so dark, the man subconsciously pulls out his cell phone to illuminate the room. Prepare to find a power source. And yet the lights have been on for less than 3 seconds. The man was pushed by Shangjin. The men who didn't get it started cursing again. But Shangjin just looks at him coldly. Then he slowly closed the door behind him. The last thing he says is, "Eat clean this time, my friend." The man was enraged, cursing and telling Shangjin to open the door. But before the man could get up, he hears a rustling sound from behind him. The man rushes to pick up his cell phone and look behind him. When the man gets a good look, a huge, oversized mouth was already biting down on him. The man's head is split in two in an instant. And then the only sound left in the room is the sound of bones being chewed on. But Shangjin's job is particularly troublesome. The next day, Shangjin just arrived at the store. The store manager scolded Shangjin. He said Shangjin was short $300 when she came to work yesterday. Shangjin hurriedly explained that the glasses man on the night shift did the reconciliation yesterday. But he wasn't finished. The store manager immediately puts on a look of disdain. He said, "It's going to come out of your paycheck anyway. Tell Shangjin to shut up. Hear about the payroll deduction." Shangjin sighed helplessly. Unfortunately, the store manager overheard it again. At that moment, he cursed again, "Little thing, I gave you a face, didn't I? Go change into your uniform and go to work." Shangjin had another idea while changing his uniform. He wanted to take the store manager back to his friend. But reason tells him to hold back a little longer. The time is fast approaching night. It's almost time for the shift to end. But Glasses Man is late. Shangjin has been messaging Glasses Man over and over again. Glasses Man never responded. Until half an hour after get off work. Glasses Man came to the store reluctantly. As soon as he came in, Shangjin asked him about the bill. But Glasses Man said that he was already short $300 when he reconciled the bill yesterday. He said Shangjin made a mistake. Shangjin didn't have time to explain. Glasses Man's expression suddenly drops. Says he's sure he's got it right. And asked Shangjin if he wanted a drink. But Shangjin doesn't have the heart to drink shit. He motioned for the Glasses Man to come over and check the accounts first. But Glasses Man is again off on a tangent. Ask him if he'd like some coffee. For that meager salary. Shangjin politely declined and then asked Glasses Man to come over again to reconcile the accounts. However, Glasses Man was furious. Directly scolding Shangjin is as distracting as a little star. Shangjin also made a couple of snide remarks. But the next moment Glasses Man suddenly grabbed Shangjin by the collar. But he didn't make a move. It's just to scare Shangjin. But Shangjin just looked at Glasses Man. And then he repeats it again, asking him to reconcile the accounts. Glasses Man knows he's in the wrong. So he dropped Shangjin. And finally, he reconciled the account with a grimace. By the time they were done, it was late at night. Shangjin's teeth are itching with anger. But when he gets home, he realizes his best friend is hungry again. The monster whispered that it was very hungry. Shangjin replied in a smooth manner, "Wait a little longer." This sick man actually keeps a man-eating monster in his house. Anyone who tries to upset him, that's 10,000 times worse than getting a letter from a lawyer. The man's name is Shangjin. He's a convenience store clerk. To feed monsters in the house, he had to bring home a live one today. Otherwise he himself would become food for the monster. As he ponders who to take home, the store door suddenly opens. It's Glasses Man for the night shift. But this guy brought his girlfriend over today. The two of them look very sweet holding hands. The girl came up and said hello to Shangjin. This made Shangjin, who had always been a loner, blush. But it's time to get off work. After turning in for his shift with Glasses Man, Shangjin is ready to go home. But in greeting the two, Glasses Man's girlfriend not only deliberately waved goodbye to Shangjin, she also gave him a special wink. It seems to be implying something. Shangjin is too shy to respond, turning away in a hurry. Waiting to leave the convenience store, on her way home Shangjin thinks to herself, if I go home like this, I'm sure I'll be chewed to pieces by that monster. That's when the butcher's store down the road caught his eye. Shangjin buys some meat and goes home. It's no time to change blood. He opens the door to his bedroom. A huge, bottomless mouth appears above Shangjin's head. Shangjin almost pissed himself. He rushed to take out the meat he just bought in his hand. Just for a moment, the meat was taken away by the monster. All that's left is Shangjin, shivering. But this food is not enough. The monster that had just finished eating meat began to ask Shangjin for food again. And that's when the door outside suddenly slammed. In order to stay alive, Shangjin doesn't dare to hesitate. He heads straight for the door. Arrived at the door, he opens the door trembling. But there's a familiar face. It's Glasses Man's girlfriend. What are you doing here? Hey, I'm here with my boyfriend, but it's raining so hard out there. Can I go in first? Before Shangjin can refuse, the woman walked right in. But no sooner had she entered than the bedroom door clanged with the creature's crash. The woman who didn't know what it was asked Shangjin, "Do you have a pet at home?" Shangjin scrambled to explain that he had a cat. Upon hearing it was a cat, the woman was immediately interested. She begins to slowly approach the bedroom, but as the woman prepares to open the door, Shangjin suddenly grabbed her hand. The two of them look at each other. The air is frozen. At the same time, Glasses Man happens to come through the door. Seeing the two holding hands, Glasses Man is furious. He walks towards Shangjin in a rage. Shangjin explains a few things, but Glasses Man wouldn't listen. Finally, Shangjin was forced into a corner, cursed both of them outright. Tell them to get the hell out of here. Just then, the door to the bedroom behind Shangjin suddenly slams open. The creature bites Glasses Man. With a click, Glasses Man is half swallowed by the creature. Shangjin turns to look at Glasses Man's girlfriend. He didn't expect her to laugh when she saw Glasses Man being eaten, but to cover up the truth, Shangjin has to get rid of the women along with him now. This sick woman is so sick that even Sick Man says she's very sick. She has a boyfriend who likes to wear green. Her boyfriend was just accidentally swallowed by a monster in front of her. Blood is splattered all over her face, but instead of crying, she laughed. And Shangjin, who is an even sicker abnormal than her, now to kill the woman who saw it all. Because this monster is his special little darling. He thought to himself, if the woman goes to the police, he'll go to jail. Finally Shangjin decides to kill the woman, but when Shangjin got close to the woman, he hesitated. He felt that if he killed the woman just like that, then what was the difference between himself and the scum of the earth? So Shangjin put down the knife in his hand. He signaled for the woman to leave, and instructed her not to say anything about what just happened. The woman smiled at the words and stood up, but before she could say anything, Shangjin suddenly yells at her, "Tell her to get the hell out." He told the woman that he was going to kill her, but the woman's mouth turns up again. She even smiled and said goodbye to Shangjin. In the end, the woman just walked away with her boyfriend's blood all over her. With the door closed, Shangjin sits paralyzed. Shangjin is a convenience store clerk. The next day he went to work as usual. He was wondering if the woman from yesterday would call the police, but the next second the woman came into the store with her suitcase, and she greeted Shangjin as if nothing had happened. Shangjin rushed to ask her what she was doing here, but the woman asked Shangjin what time she got off work. Shangjin was in a cold sweat. Seeing this, the woman just showed her hand. She said she's staying at Shangjin's house from today. Shangjin is confused and asks her, "What do you mean you live in my house?" However, the woman didn't answer him. She just asked again if Shangjin could stay at his house, and said she could stay in the living room herself if she didn't have a room. Shangjin was confused by that. He didn't know what this woman wanted from him. What does she have in mind for that monster? Suddenly the woman interrupts Shangjin's rambling thoughts. Let him check out. And yet, he's just about to check out. The store door was suddenly slammed open. A mental boy who answers the phone and swears comes in. The woman is ready to go out first, waiting at the door for Shangjin to get off work. This side of mental boy's checkout, he wants to buy another pack of cigarettes, but he won't say what brand of cigarettes he wants. He just gestured with his eyes to Shangjin's right. Shangjin followed the guy's eyes and pointed to the shelves. Ask him if it's this brand. After repeating 2 more times, the mental boy gets a little anxious. The mental boy was a bit anxious, and habitually blurted out a few words at Shangjin. Shangjin glanced back in displeasure, but when the guy saw it, he immediately said something even worse. It's a job, after all. Shangjin gritted his teeth. The mental boy didn't leave afterward. He continued to make phone calls from a side table, waiting to finish the snacks I just bought. The guy is ready to leave, but he didn't take any of the garbage he just made. and Shangjin saw it. Shangjin couldn't take it anymore. "You trashy thing, don't you know how to throw away garbage after eating?" The guy stops dead in his tracks. He turns his head and gives a friendly greeting. Facing the uneducated mental boy, Shangjin is still sensible. Let him clean up his trash before he leaves. But how could mental boy listen to him? Once again, he's mouthing off to Shangjin. He threatened Shangjin that he would beat him up. Just as Shangjin was about to do something about it, the store door opens again. It's the store manager visiting. Shangjin rushes to greet the store manager, deliberately ignoring the boy. The guy said something mean and left. He spat on the ground next to the door. Coincidentally, he turned his head and caught a glimpse of Shangjin's woman waiting at the door. The guy instantly had a lewd thought. Flirted with the woman with rather oily words, and said he could give the woman a free massage. The woman refused on the spot, but the guy turns around and whispers, "Bitch," but the woman heard him. "I don't know how long it's been. It's raining heavily. Shangjin is off duty now." Shangjin even brought an umbrella for the woman, signaling for her to go home on her own. But the woman said she was going to Shangjin's house with a shy face, not waiting for Shangjin to refuse. She turned around and started walking in the direction of Shangjin's house. Now Shangjin can't say no. So just like that, the two of them started walking home without saying a word. However, when they reached Shangjin's house, the woman suddenly stopped in her tracks. It turns out they ran into that mental boy again. The woman asked Shangjin directly, "Should this dog be alive?" She then asked Shangjin to take her luggage home first. She herself was going to do something with the boy. This woman is talking dirty to a man. She says the bed at home is too big and she's scared to sleep alone. The man said yes to the woman. He's going to her house to see how big the bed is, but the woman had just turned around and was ready to lead the way. The man suddenly grabbed the woman by the hair. It turns out the man thought the woman was trying to cut his waist. He said that the woman should go straight to the hotel with him for a massage. At once the woman became anxious and cursed angrily at him. However, the man didn't care. He just dragged the woman by her hair and headed for the hotel. The woman is struggling all she wants. He just won't let go, and terrorized the woman by saying, "Do you want to be knocked out and then dragged away?" At that moment, the woman's screams for help were heard by Shangjin, who lives upstairs. He rushed downstairs, seeing the woman being dragged on the floor by this scumbag. Not a moment's hesitation, he just slaps the man on the head. The man was knocked unconscious, and Shangjin, who was hurting someone for the first time, froze. His hands are still trembling. After freezing in place for a few seconds, suddenly the woman yells at Shangjin, signaling for him to hurry and drag the man back to the house. Shangjin dares not hesitate, rushing to join the woman and preparing to drag the man back to the house. And so the man was dragged all the way to the front door of the house. When the woman opens the door, Shangjin immediately dragged the man inside. Immediately afterward, he dragged the man into the bedroom where the monster was hidden. In a second, the man was dead. Shangjin, sitting in the doorway, was still in shock, turning his head once more to look at the woman. She's actually making a prayer gesture, and she's got a weird look on her face. The strange atmosphere makes Shangjin's head spin. He quickly told the woman that he was tired. He needs to go to his room and get some rest. After returning to the room, Shangjin is still trembling all over. I don't know how long it's been. Waiting for Shangjin to fall asleep in his room, the woman came over and took a look at Shangjin. After confirming Shangjin is asleep, the woman actually made it to the monster's bedroom door. She didn't hesitate, walked right in. Instead of being scared, she smiled at the sight of a horrible monster. She even touched it. But right then and there, the creature's eyes suddenly snapped open. He shook himself, and then stood up, and just stared at the woman. Seeing the monster like this, the woman is even more excited. She didn't know the monster was excited too. Look at the beautiful woman. The creature is ready to eat the woman alive. It's only then that the woman realizes she's afraid, but the creature's mouth was already open over the woman's head. Just as the woman is about to be engulfed, Shangjin rushes over. He rushed to call out to the creature. Then he spoke a few words to the creature. The creature seemed to understand him. After a few moments of thought, he turns around and heads back to the corner. After that, Shangjin admonished the woman, "Tell her not to come into this room." However, on her way out, the woman looked at the creature once more. Then she gave a strange look. But then something suddenly changed in the creature as well. He began to metamorphose like a worm. The next day, Shangjin came home from work as usual. Suddenly there was a delivery boy behind him. The alley was very narrow, but he still had to speed up and rush past Shangjin, and an international friendly gesture for Shangjin. The sensible Shangjin held back from getting into an altercation with him. Now he has to go home and get some food for the monster. So Shangjin buys a chicken and goes home. As soon as he came in, he put the chicken in front of the monster's bedroom. And then the woman said she was hungry, too. And then the two of them were going to order some fried chicken. Coincidentally, the delivery boy is the same one who came earlier. After he left, Shangjin opened the package and realized that the package of the fried chicken had actually been opened. A closer look revealed that there was a chicken leg missing. Shangjin, who doesn't want to be a nuisance, chooses to make do with what he has. He takes a piece of meat and eats it. But then the woman suddenly called the merchant. Another order of fried chicken. The corners of her mouth lift up in a wicked smile. But coincidentally, it's the same guy who delivers this order. Don't ever deliver to this woman, because sending her food is like giving her your own kidneys. She don't even give you anesthesia when she cut your waist. Just now, woman and Shangjin are going to order some fried chicken, but when the takeout arrived, the delivery boy asked Shangjin for a delivery fee. Shangjin explained. He paid for it when he placed the order. But the little man was impatient. It's past 12 p.m. Delivery charges are going up. Have Shangjin pay him another $18, or he won't get fried chicken. Shangjin has no choice but to go back to his room to get the money. Shangjin is trying to restrain herself. However, when Shangjin handed the money to the boy, he grabbed it out of his hand, and then he turned around and walked away. Shangjin held back this time, but when it was opened, Shangjin realizes that the fried chicken has been opened. There's a chicken leg missing. The woman on the other side of the table can't take it anymore. She immediately called the merchant, reordered the fried chicken, and a wicked smile at the corner of his mouth. Coincidentally, the fried chicken was delivered by the same guy. The young man arrived at the door of Shangjin's house. He knocked on the door impatiently, but this time the person who opened the door was the woman who had just placed the order. But the little man still whispered, "Two little bastards, why can't you order it all at once?" And yet he's not finished. The woman stabbed him in the shoulder. Reacting, the little man kicks the woman out of the way, watching the woman fall hard to the ground. The little brother is ready to pull the knife from his shoulder. At that moment Shangjin, who heard the commotion, rushes over from the living room. And the little brother here has pulled out the knife through the pain. He then rushed towards the woman with the knife in hand. It was a close call. Shangjin kicks little brother out of the way. Then Shangjin asks the woman what's going on here. But the woman's mouth turned up. Then she smiled and said to Shangjin that this guy needed to be judged. This kind of scum shouldn't be alive. Hearing of the judged, Shangjin understands. Let the monster eat the scum in front of him. No doubt the best way to judge him. With that, he immediately yelled towards the monster's bedroom, signaling for the creature to come out for a midnight snack. However, after a few seconds, there's no movement in the bedroom. No luck. Shangjin had to take the initiative and drag the man to the bedroom. But by the time he reached the bedroom door, Shangjin realized he hadn't even eaten his afternoon chicken yet. Turn your eyes again and look at that little cutie. He's curled up right now. It's like a silkworm forming a chrysalis. There's no sign of life. Just as Shangjin froze, the man suddenly came charging forward violently. He tackled Shangjin to the ground and starts beating Shangjin up. At this point, the woman from earlier came over with a knife. The little brother saw it and got up in a hurry. He throws a punch directly at the woman. The woman followed suit and stabbed Shao in the waist. The boy screams in pain. He then jumped on the woman like a madman. The woman then took the opportunity to stab him in the back. Immediately after that, the two of them just fell to the ground. At this time, the young man had been stabbed by the woman and had lost his mind. Suddenly he raises his head violently, then slams it down hard on the woman's forehead, though seriously injuring the woman. But he's starting to get a little dizzy himself. However, as the little brother is about to faint, Shangjin suddenly attacked him from behind. The little brother then collapsed to the ground. Then Shangjin dragged him to the monster's bedroom. Shangjin even thoughtfully put a band-aid on the woman afterward, but the two of them just sat down and breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly there's a knock on the door. It's the police. He also saw the fried chicken and blood left on the floor. At the sound, Shangjin and the woman didn't dare to make a sound. Then the policeman knocked on the door a few more times. No one answered the door. He's ready to go, and made a call to a co-worker. Deliberately said loudly that he was a community member. Found the house empty, and now he's ready to go back. Shangjin hears the footsteps of the police leaving. Shangjin sits on the ground, relieved. He didn't know that the cop hadn't actually left. He also heard Shangjin sitting on the floor from outside. He then pulled out a crowbar. He directly hit the door of Shangjin's house with a stick. I've never seen such an arrogant thug. The cops are breaking down the door, but he's still holding up a knife to terrorize the police. The cops signaled him to drop the knife or he'd shoot him. Instead, he suddenly clenched his teeth, then yelled towards the bedroom behind him. Immediately afterward, a behemoth came out of the bedroom. And then the monster just appeared in front of the cop. The cop raises his gun and fires, but it's too late. The monster bites him right in the head. With a click, the policeman is split in two by the monster, and the part that was bitten by the monster was eaten alive by him. Shangjin was dumbfounded. A monster that already looked scary now looks even scarier, and that's when it happened. Suddenly Shangjin got slapped. It's that woman. She's signaling Shangjin to wake up, indicating that the creature must now be taken out of the house. And the sound of police gunfire is sure to bring in more police. Shangjin reacts and realizes the seriousness of the situation. Afterwards, led by the woman, The monster was covered by the two men with bedding. They start heading for the remote backcountry in the night. Eventually up in the hills they find a junkyard. From the hill, police cars are gathering under Shangzhen's house. The two of them don't dare to hesitate, starting to move on to the inside of the scrapyard. Soon they're walking to a tin room that looks like an employee's break room. The woman at the door looked through the window. There's only one middle-aged man sleeping. Then the woman decides to just tie up the older man. He told Shangzhen to go ahead and hide the monster. She's going to go find some tools first. I don't know how long it's been. Uncle suddenly woke up from his dream. At this moment Shangzhen and the woman are holding an iron bar to dislike his face. The woman signaled for Uncle to cooperate. As long as he's honest, he won't be harmed. The dumbfounded uncle nodded his head in agreement. And with that, the uncle was tied to a chair by the two men. And on the other side, last night after the police found the policeman who was split in two by the monster, through forensic identification. Forensics now only speculates that the cop was killed by some kind of animal. But according to the female officer who took over the case, Shangzhen is the final suspect. Now back to Shangzhen and the woman. After all that, Shangzhen decides to talk to the woman about the origin of the monster. In fact, the monster is his best buddies. His name is Shanyu. At first, there were 3 people living in Shangzhen's house. Besides Shangzhen and Shanyu, there was a friend named Inha. And he's not like Shanyu and Shangzhen. Inha is great at everything he does, from high school to college to work. There are no stumbling blocks on the road of life. Very good personality. And lots of friends. Shangzhen's personality is not so good compared to Inha's. Shanyu has also always been more introverted. The other night, Inha bought wine back with his first month's salary, but Shangzhen and Shanyu hadn't started working part-time at that time, and they really haven't drunk alcohol for a long time, so the 3 of them drank a lot of wine that day. But after 3 rounds of drinks, Inha is a little bit proud. He says he got paid quite a bit today. Let them drink as much as they want. And then in a teasing tone, he said to the 2 again, "You'll have to buy me a drink when you get your first month's pay. The point is, I don't know if you 2 losers can make me drink this year, haha, probably because of low self-esteem." Because of this one little joke, Shangzhen is overreacting. Shangzhen breaks the drinking mood immediately. It's Shanyu who keeps stopping Shangzhen, but Shangzhen was too angry. He dumped Shanyu and then had a big fight with Inha. Finally Shangzhen pushed Inha, because he couldn't control his strength after drinking. Inha fell heavily to the ground. He's cracked his head on the ground. Inha lost consciousness on the spot. And then he stopped breathing. But Shangzhen didn't want that. But tragedy has struck. Shanyu rushes up and prepares to call an ambulance. But just as Shanyu was about to make the call, Shangzhen grabbed his hand. He then proceeds to talk to Shanyu. But Shanyu is one of those honest people who just won't say no. He was quickly convinced by Shangzhen. So the 2 took advantage of the rainy night to move Inha out. Then they buried Inha in a wasteland. But after that day, Shanyu began to change. He locked himself in his room and played games all the time. Though he usually likes to play games. But after that incident, he started playing games all the time without eating or drinking. It's like a desperate attempt to keep his mind off of it. After that, Shanyu's body began to change a little bit. It's not just fat, it's about slowly becoming less human. The woman laughed out loud after hearing this, because she's far more abnormal than we thought. This yellow-haired guy was almost chopped to death by the man with an axe because he occupied his parking space. And then the yellow-haired man cursed at him, but the man just calmly wiped the blood off the axe. Seeing this, Yellow Hair rushes to the surrounding passers-by to ask for help, but the passers-by just looked at him coldly, without the slightest intention to help. Before the yellow-haired man could react, he was hit on the back by the axe. Finally, accompanied by Huang Mao's screams, he was hacked to death by the man in the street. It turns out the man was a religious missionary, and the people in the crowd are his followers. They believe in a church called the Universal Church of Eternal Life, and the purpose of the church is to judge the scum of society. The so-called trial is to make them pay with blood or life, because in this corrupt society, law and morality are nothing but a waste of paper in the eyes of the masses. Only a small percentage of honest people are bound, and the scum of society, who are worse than dogs and pigs, are still doing what they're doing. So the birth of the cosmic eternal life cult was inevitable, and it exists in every city in the world. But a sick world can have sick beliefs. They believe in a species of god that is a man-eating monster with a huge mouth and fangs, because those monsters will help them devour the scum that need to be judged. That's why the believers call those monsters Lord Molar, and this woman, Ziyuan, was one of them. Yesterday, after Ziyuan and Shangzhen kidnapped the junkyard uncle, Shangzhen didn't know what to do with him, so Ziyuan, as a believer, decided to hand him over to the so-called Lord Molar for judgment. Then the two of them threw him into a small dark room. After the door closed, the man began to try to free himself from the plastic bag over his head. However, just after removing the plastic bag from his head, he heard a rustling sound from the darkness next to him. As the sound gets closer and closer, suddenly the creature's great face emerges from the darkness. The older man's scalp instantly exploded. but the monster just hovered behind him for a while, and then it shrinks back. Then the door of the small dark room was opened. It is Ziyuan and Shangjin. They helped Uncle up. The uncle looks confused, rushing to ask what the monster was. Ziyuan said, "That's Lord Molar," as he untied the uncle. "Congratulations on your new life." The older man went on to ask, "What does this new life mean?" "It means that those who shouldn't be alive are put on trial by Lord Molar, and those who have been judged will be reborn." Just when Uncle was still wondering, suddenly there's the sound of a car honking outside the door. At this moment a truck delivering scrap is parked outside the gate, and the driver is swearing ferociously. He's signaling for the older man to open the door for him. He's ready to go over there. But when the uncle saw who was coming, he turned his head to the two men and said, "Didn't you guys say that monster was a judge? That kid at the gate is the biggest piece of scum in the world. Please be sure to help me judge him." Then the older man went and opened the door for the man. The man came in and cursed the uncle affectionately. The uncle seems to be very afraid of him, and doesn't dare to say a word back when he's scolded. And then the man got out of the car. He is going to negotiate the price with the uncle. Uncle said the market has changed. The price has gone up a little bit. However, as soon as the uncle finished his sentence, the man suddenly waved to the uncle. The unsure uncle takes 2 steps forward. But next moment, he was slapped across the face by the man. He immediately called the older man an asshole. He also said that uncle was just trying to cheat money from the middle. I can see that uncle is often bullied. He's still smiling after he's been called a loser. He was just about to explain, but all he got in return was a kick in the ass. Even so, uncle is still explaining, but the man won't listen. He just started beating the uncle up. Shangjin, who was watching from the sidelines, finally couldn't help himself and got up and rushed over to him. This is the first time a girl tries to fight without underwear. They're facing an older man in green. The girl raises her pole and strikes first, but before she could touch him, he hit her in the face. Shangjin grabbed weapon and attacked him, but he was successfully blocked by the uncle. Shangjin was even knocked back by him. At this time, the girl pulled out a pistol from behind her back. The uncle thought it was a toy gun. He immediately scolded the girl, but before he could finish his sentence, he was suddenly hit with a stick. It was that old man. When the man in green wakes up, he has been kidnapped by 3 people to a small dark room. Seeing this, he rushes to use profanity to signal the crowd to let him go. But as soon as the words were out of his mouth, there was a rustling in the corner. When the man fixes his eyes, a monster has opened its mouth to bite at him. The monster bit his head directly. Then the green-clad man was swallowed up by the monster, and the junkyard uncle saw the monster eating people. He didn't even blink. At the end, he was on his knees, and he kept saying thank you. It turns out there's a church in this world called the Universal Church of Eternal Life. That monster is the god they believe in. In their eyes, the monster will judge the world. The green-clad man often bullies the uncle at the scrapyard, so when the monster ate the green man, it was judging him. And Ziyuan is part of the church. Afterwards, Ziyuan offered Shangjin to go to their church with her. Shangjin agreed to Ziyuan. He didn't know that his move would change his life forever. At night, the junkyard uncle takes Shangjin and Ziyuan and the monster, and prepares to travel together to the nearest branch of the cosmic eternal life cult. Waiting for the morning, the 3 finally arrived. As soon as they got off the bus, a few believers came out to greet them. Seeing the warmth of these people, Ziyuan rushed to ask them where the dorms were. She said she needed to take Shangjin for a rest, but the lead missionary said, "We need to check the contents of the van first." Ziyuan asked Shangjin to open the fence and show them. With that, Shangjin opens the fence. Then he lifted the quilt that was hiding the monster. Several people were shocked at the sight of the monster, because, as believers, they had never seen the true God of the church's faith. But now, after seeing, the missionary had a sick idea. He consults with his own followers, that he would sell this monster to the hierarchy of the general church. That would be at least $600,000. A few minions just muttered in front of Ziyuan. Ziyuan got angry when he heard them. She immediately started cursing the lead missionary. The missionary flipped out at that. He turns to his men and tells them to get their knives. He threatened to kill Ziyuan and Shangjin and feed them to the dogs. Something's wrong. Ziyuan signaled Shangjin and uncle to get in the car and run away. At this time, the missionary suddenly grabbed Ziyuan. The older man tried to stop him. The knife went straight through his neck. He fell to the ground and lost consciousness. The one who killed the uncle was the blue-clad devotee who went for the knife. Shangjin rushes to help, but he'd only taken 2 steps when he was knocked down by a believer. Shangjin is pinned down. Ziyuan is under the control of the blue-clad believers, and the missionary is going to kill Shangjin. He went right up to Shangjin and said he was going to kill them all and sell the monster, and then leave this shit church again. He raised the knife in his hand as he spoke. This girl laughed after being hugged from behind by a pervert, because the pervert is about to be eaten by a monster right in front of her. Just now, Ziyuan is being controlled by that abnormal. He can't even move his limbs. Shangjin was also pinned down by a man in green. Just as the leader of the two was about to kill Shangjin rushes to yell at the van next to him, signaling for the monster in the van to come out. The creature climbed out of the van at the sound of the voice. It opens its mouth and prepares to swallow their boss in one gulp. With a poof, the boss's head was eaten directly by the creature. After that, the headless boss wobbled around for a couple of seconds before collapsing in front of Shangjin. The man with the glasses who witnessed this was dumbfounded. He's just about to turn and run, but before he could take 2 steps, the creature ate him. The man in green saw that something was wrong and quickly begged Shangjin for mercy, but before he could finish his sentence, his head and body were split in 2 by the monster. In an instant, the church was turned into an inferno. The creature was going to kill everyone it could see outside the church. It was only Shangjin's words that made the creature stop its attack. Then the monster walked slowly towards the van. It's back in the van like nothing happened. Seeing this, Ziyuan started chanting Lord Moller's slogan in front of the crowd. Then all the people outside the church who were still alive started to kneel down. And then it was night. An older woman in the church has arranged a place for Shangjin and Ziyuan to stay. The monster was put in a single room by Shangjin. At night, Shangjin tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He recalled the scene of the monster eating the man in the daytime and felt very complicated, so he went to the bathroom to use the toilet. But when he came out of the bathroom, he heard something actually moving in the monster's room, and a little girl's voice. He decisively pushes open the door to the room. At that moment, a little girl was bowing her head in front of the monster. Shangjin thought the monster was going to eat the little girl. He rushed to stop the monster. Then he took the little girl out. Shangjin then asked the girl where she lived. But the little girl coyly said she had something she wanted to ask Lord Moller. However, Shangjin interrupts the girl before she can say anything, and told her to go home quickly. And finally escorted the little girl for a while. Shangjin told her not to come back, but Shangjin didn't know. In fact, that little girl was afraid to go home, because if she went home, she'd face her father's abuse as usual. Just a few minutes ago, the thing that the little girl came to the monster's room to ask the monster was that she wanted the monster to eat her father. The girl prayed for the monster to eat her father, because her father is a beast worse than pigs and dogs. Not only does he drink all day, he beats his wife. He slaps his wife whenever he's not happy. He has no mercy for his own daughter. The usual girl is often covered in bruises. And tonight, just because the girl came home a little late, the father was furious. He said he'd break the girl's legs. The girl's mother tried to stop the man, but he said, "It's your fault, you bitch, you can't even raise a kid. It's late, and a little girl is still wandering around." The man raises his right hand, and then he hit the girl hard in the face. The poor girl cried in her mother's arms until late at night. Desperate girl proposes to her mom. She says she'll let her mom come with her to the Universal Church of Eternal Life. This church is dedicated to judging the scum of society, but the so-called trial is to let them be eaten by monsters. The monster before was the god of the church. The monster will help them devour the scum of the earth. That's why it's also known as Lord Moller to the faithful. Late at night, the man wakes up as usual. Subconsciously, he asks his wife to get him some water. But after a couple of calls, the man realizes there's no answer. Take a closer look. Mother and daughter are both gone. Because they were praying in the church at the time, they don't dare stay at home anymore. But what they don't realize is, at dawn, the man drank some wine and took a shovel to the church to deal with them. Then he kicked in the door with a vengeance. He was still spewing extremely ugly swear words, but when he opens the door, all the man sees is a giant. A man and a monster look each other in the eye. The man is suddenly paralyzed with fear. Just then, mother and daughter happen to be coming back from eating breakfast outside, just in time to see the monster preparing to eat the man. The churchgoers all fell to their knees at the sight of the monster, but the man was still swearing at this point, cussing the hell out of this monster. At this point, the little girl suddenly blurts out to the monster, "Lord Moller, this man is my father. Please eat him." After hearing that, the creature looked at the man again. Then without hesitation, it opened its mouth and swallowed the girl's father directly into its stomach. Watching her father get swallowed up by the monster, the girl's heart is full of mixed emotions. At the same time, the man screams as he is engulfed or heard by Shangjin and Ziyuan. They immediately followed the sound. At this time, the man had been eaten until only his feet were left. Shangjin is confused, but the little girl explains that she asked Lord Moller to eat him. "My dad beats me and my mom every day. That's why I asked Lord Moller to judge him." Shangjin doesn't know what to say after hearing this. Ziyuan, on the other hand, has a new plan after seeing this. Afterwards, Ziyuan brought Shangjin and the monster to a larger Universal Eternal Life church in the city. There's a missionary here who brought Ziyuan into the fold. As soon as they met, Ziyuan introduced Shangjin to the missionary. Then Shangjin showed the missionary the monster. As soon as he saw the monster, the missionary's eyes went straight. Returning to his senses, he rushed to his knees, with words of thanks on his lips. Ziyuan and Shangjin were then received by the missionaries into the church's study, because it was a day of rest for the church, and the monster was put in an unoccupied church. The three of them exchange a few pleasantries. The missionary rushed to inform the higher-ups of the church. He said that they should come and see Lord Moller, Soon a black van pulled up to the church floor. A man in a red suit with a band-aid all over his face gets out. He's a branch minister of the city's Universal Church of Eternal Life, Minister Pei. And inside the van are 7 or 8 big men with tranquilizer guns. Yes, they're planning to capture the monster, because there's a dark side within the church hierarchy. This man who looks like a man is really not a man. He was actually pulled by the hair by a woman and called a piece of trash. He kneels down on the ground like a dog, letting the woman slap him in the mouth. And the woman stomped on his leg with her high heel. His legs were crushed, but all he can do is act like he's enjoying it, and whimpering like a licking dog. And the man was punished simply because he said the wrong thing in a meeting. They were all members of a church called the Universal Church of Eternal Life. This church believes in a monster with a giant mouth and fangs. That man is a high-ranking member of the church. He's in charge of recruitment, also known as Minister Pei. Just now, all the top people of the cosmic eternal cult are meeting. The man in the general manager's seat was named Lord Tiger's Teeth. And bigger than him is this old man. He was the chairman of the entire church organization, and the richest man in the city. When the meeting was about to be adjourned, suddenly there's a little brother to report. They said they found the god they believed in a branch church under Minister Pei. The chairman of the board was interested. Minister Pei quickly joined in the praise. But when the general manager Tiger's Teeth heard it, his expression immediately dropped. He turns his head and goes off on a tangent with the chairman. Says he's heard a lot of rumors about a god coming down to earth. Then he said that he could go ahead and make sure instead of the chairman, to see if the god had really come down. With that, the chairman nodded. He signaled for the meeting to be adjourned. At the end of the meeting, he's rubbing shoulders with the woman from earlier. Then he ordered her to punish Minister Pei. And Minister Pei doesn't know that he's going to be punished by this woman. He just walks past the woman with a smile on his face. So the woman stopped him right there. And that's how it started. When Minister Pei was punished by a woman, Lord Tiger's Teeth has also arrived. A simple remark was made to Minister Pei. Next time it won't just be a punishment. He then gestured for the woman to follow him. Minister Pei dared to breathe a sigh of relief when they were gone. It turns out that Lord Tiger's Teeth is not a believer at all. He's just after their chairman's money, to cheat the chairman of the board. He wouldn't let the Lord of God, whom the church believes in, show up, because if the chairman of the board finds out that the true Godhead has appeared, his position will be shaken. Afterwards, Minister Pei was assigned by Tiger's Teeth to capture their god. A van of gunmen with tranquilizer guns was also specifically called in for Minister Pei. At this time, the self-righteous god of the church believers, that is, the monster raised by Shangjin, is now in the church of the branch church. Shangjin and Ziyuan are chatting with the missionaries of the branch church in the study. As soon as Minister Pei met with the missionaries, Minister Pei was in a hurry to get the missionary to lead the way to the monster. Soon several people arrived at the church. As the doors of the church open, the congregation walks in, but the monster has somehow disappeared. While Minister Pei was whining to the missionaries, a few drops of clear liquid suddenly appeared at his feet. Unexplained, Minister Pei looks above his head. The creature is now hanging upside down from the ceiling, staring at him. The man's feet are suddenly covered in drops of unknown liquid. The man looks up. A monster is actually hanging upside down over his head. Minister Pei was taken aback. While Shangjin was trying to talk the creature out of eating people, Minister Pei rushes to the phone. He signals for the people in the car outside with the tranquilizer guns to come in and capture the monster. The creature seems to have sensed Minister Pei's bad intentions. He attacked Minister Pei despite Shangjin's attempts to stop him. But Minister Pei subconsciously cursed at the monster out of fear. This reminded Ziyuan, who was on the sidelines, previously at another church. The minions reacted the same way. And that's when Ziyuan finally reacts. This Minister Pei is not here to worship, but it's too late. The doors of the church were kicked in. Several burly men clutching tranquilizer guns appeared. Ziyuan yells for Shangjin to take the monster and run, but the anesthetic had already been shot at the monster. Several shots of anesthetic hit the creature squarely in the face. The anesthetized creature falls to the ground instantly. Immediately after that, several strong men took out their trapping nets and tied up the monster directly. Ziyuan and Shangjin were also forced to take control by 2 burly men in the process. The missionary, not knowing the situation, rushed to ask Minister Pei what he meant, but Minister Pei laughed. And he laughed that big, bitchy laugh. He playfully says to the missionary, "Hey, little fool, you don't really think this monster is a god, do you? What an idiot. Come to your senses. There is no god. Those who were killed didn't get any bullshit trials. They were just killed by monsters. Brainwashed by religion, the fool." The preacher froze at the sound of his words. In his heart he still believes in the existence of a so-called god. Just as the missionary is about to break down, Ziyuan wakes him up. He yelled at the missionaries, "Those guys are heretics." The missionary's eyes glazed over at the word heretic. Finally, when the missionary was also controlled by the 2 minions, he's come to his senses. He will judge all the traitors of the church. And with that, he slammed his fist into the minion that was holding him. Then he charges straight at Minister Pei. and grabbed him with a straight hand. But after all, 2 fists can't beat 4 hands. Just when the missionaries were about to kill Minister Pei, suddenly the minion next to him shoots a tranquilizer round. The anesthetic hit the missionary square in the neck. The missionary fell unconscious immediately. Under the command of Minister Pei, Shangjin and Ziyuan and the missionaries were tied up in the same car, and the monster was put in another car. When the creature woke up from its coma, he finds himself in a cage. The cage is made of hard material. It seems to have been built specifically to trap him. When the monster looked carefully outside the cage, there are 2 other monsters imprisoned just like him. At the same time, Shangjin and his team are going to be dragged to a wasteland and buried according to Minister Pei's plan. Soon 2 minions pulled them to the place. The hole was already dug. But just as they were about to bury them, the missionary suddenly woke up, and when he came to his senses, he begins to build up power in his hands. As the missionary's brow tightened, the ropes in his hands were simply broken free. The missionary didn't hesitate. He charged straight at the minion shoveling dirt, and then he grabbed him by the neck. He kept squeezing him until he suffocated. Seeing this, another minion prepared to come over to help. But he's no match for the missionary. The missionary beat him up in a couple of rounds and tied up. Afterwards the missionary learned from this minion that the creature had been sent to the warehouse where they were being held. The missionary then rushes over with Shangjin and Ziyuan. But on the way to the warehouse, the minion suddenly said in a mocking voice, "Do you guys know what this monster is called on the internet? It's a genetic mutation. They're not human and they're not divine. They're the product of human genetic mutation." This man didn't wear underwear during live broadcast, so he was tied up by a woman and put in a small dark room. She also wants to reward him with a thick and long thing. So this man is a scientist. He specializes in the evolution of living things. He's made some recent discoveries about human evolution. A few days ago, his colleagues photographed monsters of enormous size in one of Earth's countries. They found this monster in small numbers, but all over the globe. The main thing is, according to their research, these monsters have human DNA in their bodies, so they identified these monsters as evolved forms of humans, or the product of a human genetic mutation, and he found out that these monsters existed right here in the country. 2.5 hours ago, he specialized in live webcasting that the monsters were hiding inside this cosmic eternalist church that was spread across the country. He even revealed to the internet that this church worships those monsters as gods, and yet, he was trying to build a following by broadcasting these things, but he didn't realize that the broadcast had caught the attention of the higher-ups in the church. The man watching the broadcast was named Lord Tiger's Teeth. He is the top manager of the Universal Church of Eternal Life, and the woman's boss. Over here he ordered his men to arrest the man just after he watched the live broadcast. 2.5 hours have passed since then. The scientist is now leisurely cutting the live footage from a moment ago. Suddenly the doorbell rings. The man at the door said he had a delivery for him. Scientists also looked at Cat's eyes, but all he saw was a man holding a box. The unsuspecting scientist decides to open the door, but as soon as he opens the door, the man raises a knife and swings it straight at him. Ketchup splattered all over the floor. And when the scientist wakes up again, he's been tied up in a cell. And then there's the scene before that. However, just as the woman raises her hammer to reward the scientist, the door was suddenly pushed open by a minion. He looks panicked and says there's some outlaws out there. And the outlaws he was talking about were Shangjin and his gang. According to the information provided by the minions who were responsible for burying them earlier, they've managed to find the place where the creature is being held, in order to free the monster trapped in the cell as soon as possible. Now they're ready to force their way in. As long as they see minions blocking the road, the lead missionary would just axe his way through. Ziyuan is not soft at all. She's got a steel pipe and he's smashing people. After taking care of the 2 janitorial boys, Shangjin decisively rummages through them to find the gate key. With Shangjin unlocking the gate, the creak of the door as they push it open attracts one of the minions inside the cell. The missionary sees that he's alone, planned to rush in without ignoring him, but the kid suddenly turned his head. He signaled for his buddies in the house to get their hands dirty, and then a couple of strong men came out from behind him, but they were no match for the missionary. They were beaten by the missionaries in seconds and cried for their parents. Also just happened to find out where the monster was from the leader of the group. However, a few of them were just about to leave. Suddenly they were stopped by a woman. The very woman who was about to reward the scientist. At the moment, she's preparing to fight the 3 with a dozen or so strong men. Because this woman who was not wearing underwear took her brothers out to fight, she was shot in the head by Ziyuan. Just now, Ziyuan took Shangjin and the missionaries with him, intending to charge straight through. They forced their way right into a warehouse full of cultists. But after the minions, there was a woman with yellow hair. The woman said, "I can give you a chance to live because we were once colleagues." But now the missionary's only thought is to save the monster. Completely frantic, he takes his axe and prepares to attack. He says that even if he dies, he'll save the monster. Ha ha ha. The woman who heard that laughed. But before the woman could say anything else, she was suddenly shot in the head. She was killed while her eyes were still open. And it was Ziyuan who shot him. Upon seeing this, a few of the other strong men immediately lowered their weapons. Shangjin then chose to go alone to save the monster. Ziyuan and the missionary were in charge of watching over the strong men. Soon Shangjin leads the pipe into a hidden doorway. At the gate was sitting a minion. He saw the blood stains on Shangjin's body, hurriedly shaking the club out of his hand. Then he rushes straight at Shangjin, and it hit Shangjin's arm hard, but he was trying to save his brother. Shangjin decided to fight him. He clutches the pipe in his hand. Then he finds the right moment to backhand the kid in the face. This one knocked the man off his feet. The whole man collapsed to the ground. Shangjin doesn't dare stay a second longer. He rushes on towards the cell where the monster is being held. Finally, after Shangjin opens the last door, he sees the cage. See Shangjin come in. The creature called out to him and said he was hungry. Shangjin immediately prepared to unlock the door for him, and that's when it happened. A light suddenly hit Shangjin's face. In the next second, a few strong men broke through the door. The leader of the group is Minister Pei, who was almost eaten by the monster. When he saw Shangjin, he immediately ordered his boys to rush up and beat him up because he was too panicked. The lock in Shangjin's hand was slow to open. However, just as the minions rushed toward Shangjin, the lock has finally been opened by Shangjin. Just as Shangjin is 2.5 basketballs away from the knife, the minion was directly bitten off by the creature's waist. In an instant, he's a meal for the monster. Minister Pei was scared shitless. He turned and ran, but the creature's neck stretches. Minister Pei was killed before he could take 2 steps. The sound of bones being chewed at the end. Minister Pei, death. But just as Shangjin was about to leave, the creature stopped Shangjin. Signal Shangjin to open the cage next to him. Follow the creature's footsteps. Shangjin comes to another cage, looking into the cage by the light of the flashlight. Shangjin is stunned by what he sees. A creature similar to that one is being caged. When Shangjin turns his head again, there's one behind him. The creature had no time to explain. It just told Shangjin to let them all go first. Shangjin gave the monster a look back, and then helped them all unlock the door. At the same time, Ziyuan and the missionaries have made a move on their side. The door behind a couple of burly men is suddenly opened. Ziyuan and the missionaries thought Shangjin had returned, but it's actually Lord Tiger's Teeth, the leader of these strong men. He immediately told the men to get up, and he signaled for his boys to get their tranquilizer guns ready. Under the command of Lord Tiger's Teeth, the situation was turned around in an instant. This man kills a man with his axe every day, but he only kills the scum of society. And the people he's going to kill today is someone who only hides behind a screen and watches lewd videos? This man is a missionary, and the man watching the video is a pagan who is in opposition to the missionary. Codename, Lord Tiger's Teeth. Just now, the missionary was leading Ziyuan into a fight with a group of strong men, because Ziyuan had a gun, temporarily controlling a few strong men in front of him. Yet it's only been 2.5 minutes of control. The door behind a couple of burly men suddenly opens. Lord Tiger's Teeth breaks down the door with a group of minions, preparing to intercept the missionaries and their party. After the situation was reversed by Lord Tiger's Teeth, he teasingly says towards the missionary and Ziyuan, I mean, are you guys even willing to die for that monster? Do you know how much I've lost because of you guys? Shut the fuck up, you heathen. Heathen? You're calling me a heretic. You're the ones who deify monsters, aren't you? However, as soon as he spoke, the sound of heavy footsteps comes from right behind him. Waiting for him to turn around and look, the door behind him has been opened. Shangjin appeared behind the crowd with 2 monsters. All of a sudden Lord Tiger's Teeth panicked. He signaled for the minions to shoot at the monster, but the minions have just raised their guns. The overhead vents suddenly shuttered. The next second, another monster falls from the sky. One of the unlucky ones was eaten in an instant, followed by a slaughter by the monsters. Lord Tiger's Teeth saw something was wrong. He was going to escape alone, but the missionary saw him. He didn't hesitate. The axe in his hand builds up strength, and throws it at Lord Tiger's Teeth. The axe spins in the air for 2.5 seconds before it strikes Lord Tiger's Teeth directly in the shoulder. Nearly killed, Lord Tiger's Teeth rushes to remove the axe from his back, turns his head and curses at the missionary, bastard. But he hadn't finished his sentence. The creature's mouth is already on him. Lord Tiger's Teeth has been swallowed alive by the creature. Lord Tiger's Teeth's minions are then destroyed by Ziyuan and his men. In an instant, the warehouse became a slaughterhouse for the living. I don't know how much time has passed. After all, the minions have been judged. Except for the monster Shangjin bred, the other 2 monsters were severely wounded. The monster with a human face rubbed against the other 2 monsters, and then it suddenly opened its mouth. It ate both of them. However, just as the monster was feasting, Shangjin suddenly realizes that there is an eye in the doorway next to him. When Shangjin opens the door, he realizes that the man is the kidnapped scientist. The scientist sees that Shangjin doesn't mean any harm. He told Shangjin that he was a scientist specializing in human genetic mutation. Shangjin, who once again heard about the genetic mutation, was shocked. He can't help but think of his good brother Shanyu. At this time, suddenly Ziyuan taps him on the shoulder from behind. She states that too many people have died here. The police will be here soon. Tell Shangjin to get out of here. But in order to understand what gene mutation is, he lied to Ziyuan that the scientist was a believer, and to take him with him. Hearing that he was a believer too, Ziyuan hurriedly nods his head in agreement. Afterwards, they looked for 2 cars in front of the warehouse. Ziyuan discussed it with the missionaries before they left. Asked the missionary if he wants to go to the general church. When the missionary heard that, he said yes. He said he also knew the president of the general church. So Ziyuan and the missionary decided to meet at the general church later. Then Ziyuan and Shangjin and the monster went to drive the other car. And that's it. A couple of guys in 2 cars start heading for the general church. This gray-haired old man made $1 billion with his body. He's the richest man in the city at such a young age. But he's a sick man. Having so much wealth, instead of looking for happiness, he created a church called the Universal Eternal Life Church, and he himself became the president of the church. The purpose of this church was to execute the scum of society, and the god they believe in is a man-eating monster. It's just a shame that since the founding of the church, as chairman of the board, he had never seen the real god in reality. But today he's going to see it. Just now. Shangjin and his team finally rescued the god of the church, the man-eating monster, after going through so much hardship. And they were going to take the monster to the church in a car overnight. By the next morning, Ziyuan and the missionaries have just stopped the car. They see the chairman of the board being greeted at the door. The missionary rushes forward to greet him, and showed the chairman the monster. As soon as he saw the monster, the chairman fell to his knees, and tearfully shouted the slogan of Lord Molar. After that, Shangjin and the others were taken for a full body checkup by the chairman of the board, and the monster was placed in a special VIP room. Shangjin was sent to a guest room after being checked for any serious injuries. The chairman of the board even gave Shangjin a set of clothes. It's the same suit as Mr. Tiger's teeth. The man who delivered the suit told Shangjin, it's a gift from the chairman to Shangjin. This made the usually shy Shangjin a little overwhelmed. But in the end, Shangjin puts it on. Immediately after that, he was arranged by the maid to go to the restaurant to have a big meal. Shangjin has just sat down. Ziyuan is here too. She even said hello to Shangjin. Shangjin's face turned red. The two chatted for a while, and then the missionary arrived. But he was wounded, his arm is broken, and a slight limp in his leg. Soon the 3 of them finished their feast. They were given a full body massage. Shangjin took a bath afterwards. After a day's rest, Shangjin lies in bed with a sense of relief. He couldn't help but think of what the minion had said earlier. He said the monsters were just human mutations, but then he thinks about it. The chairman of this morning's board is on his knees to the monster, and shouting Lord Molar's slogan on his lips. Shangjin thinks to himself, did the good brothers really turn out to be something? Or is it just that they twisted their beliefs? While Shangjin was in a daze, the door to the room suddenly slammed. It's the servant from the daytime. He came to inform Shangjin on behalf of the chairman. Inform Shangjin that he is required to attend the night church service in the evening. Soon it was time for the evening. The Church of the General Synod is full of believers. The chairman of the Board of Trustees is giving an impassioned speech from the stage. But Shangjin, who was on the stage, was still in a daze. He asked Ziyuan why he was here. Ziyuan didn't answer. She just asked him to wait a moment. With the chairman's speech bringing the mood to a climax, he began to announce that the new tiger's teeth would be coming up to speak, and then he rubbed his hands together. Ziyuan nods his head at Shangjin as well. That means the chairman's talking about tiger's teeth is Shangjin. Shangjin is confused. But seeing Ziyuan like this, plus the believers on the stage kept chanting Lord Tiger's teeth. Finally Shangjin is on stage, in front of thousands of believers. Shangjin accepted the position of Lord Tiger's teeth offered to him by the chairman of the board, and greeted the congregation as Lord Tiger's teeth. Since Shangjin became Lord Tiger's teeth of the church, he's been restless. He spent the night thinking about what the scientist he saved yesterday said. He also said that the monster was just a human genetic mutation. Eventually he thought about it. Shangjin decides to go to him and find out. He went all the way to the scientist's floor. After confirming the room, Shangjin knocked on the door. Upon seeing the scientist, Shangjin quickly signaled for him to come out with him. They sat down in one of the chairs in the church. Shangjin asks the scientist directly about the mutation. The scientist who heard the question touches his pocket. He takes out his cell phone and opens the video he made earlier. He gestures for Shangjin to take a look. The cell phone is playing the same video he made earlier about human evolution. After watching the video, Shangjin confessed to the scientist. He said that his friend had also turned into a monster. The scientist asked Shangjin, did your friend have any eating disorders or special conditions before the mutation? He didn't seem to eat much meat back then. He said it was indigestion. Meat? It's not an allergy to meat, is it? Any other symptoms? Shangjin here hasn't had a chance to answer yet. Suddenly Ziyuan passed by and called out to him. The two of them immediately pretended that nothing had happened. Ziyuan senses something is wrong with them, so she hurriedly signaled Shangjin to go back to rest with him. After sending Shangjin back to his room, Ziyuan was relieved to leave. But Shangjin doesn't want to sleep now. When Ziyuan is gone, Shangjin goes out quietly again. He caught the elevator to the VIP room, and then he went all the way to the monster's room. He came alone to find the monster, or his own good brother. Shangjin asked if he was a man or a god. At that the monster didn't say anything. It only left a sentence, "Good brother, please believe me." The next day, Shangjin as Lord Tiger's Teeth will attend the public trial of the villains today. Ziyuan on the sidelines gestures for Shangjin to relax a bit, but in front of these thousands of eyes, Shangjin is still a little nervous. With the preacher bringing the speech to a climax, he said that later they would allow the God they believed in to judge the wicked publicly. With the cheers of the believers on the stage, a man with his eyes covered and a chain around his neck is led up like a dog. A side door on the stage was opened immediately afterward. The monster came out of the darkness menacingly. The stage erupted with excitement. Everyone is chanting Lord Moller's slogan. The monster then stops in front of Shangjin. He signaled for Shangjin to give the order. "Judge that scum in front of all the believers." But Shangjin was a little hesitant. The prisoner also started to whitewash himself by saying he's not guilty. After stopping like that for a while, Ziyuan on the other side of the room finally couldn't help himself. She said to Shangjin with some anger, "My Lord Tiger's Teeth, what are you doing? Execute this scum." This animalistic sick man raped a 15-year-old boy in high school, but in the end, the police only sentenced him to 2 years in prison. Now 2 years have passed. Today he will finally get what he deserves. But it's not the courts that will judge him, it's this church called the Universal Church of Eternal Life. The purpose of this church is to take the place of the courts and privately execute all the scum of society. The god they believe in is a man-eating monster with a giant mouth and fangs, and Shangjin accidentally became the second in command of this church yesterday. At this point, the rapist has been brought before Shangjin. All Shangjin has to do is say the word. The rapist will be eaten alive by the monster. But the rapist suddenly started to argue. He said he was wrongly accused, and there's evidence from the court. He's desperate to prove his innocence to Shangjin. The words spit out sincerity. This makes Shangjin hesitant. It was like that for a while. The believers off stage are getting antsy. As the voices of the believers grow louder, Shangjin's head is sweating more and more. Nervous Shangjin gulps down his saliva 233 times, finally speaking in a super small voice to the monster. Let the judgment take place. In the next second, the rapist was eaten by the monster in one bite without even uttering a cry of sorrow. After the rapist was executed, the believers on the stage are once again abuzz. This strange atmosphere makes Shangjin, who is executing scum for the first time, have his scalp tingling. He couldn't help but make a vomiting motion. But there's more scum to judge. Soon the preacher announced that the next scum would come up to die. But just then, Shangjin suddenly stopped the missionary, said that this was the end of the trial for today. Shangjin then trembled and started walking towards the stage, and with that, he left the courtroom. When Shangjin returned to the room, the first thing he did was throw up on the toilet. After he vomits, he remembers the rapist. Shangjin felt that his words did not sound like a lie. You could say it was sincere. Shangjin can't help but feel that. Is what he's doing right now really the right thing? However, just as Shangjin was in doubt, the doorbell of the room suddenly rang. It's Ziyuan. As the door to the room was opened, Shangjin and Ziyuan look at each other. Ziyuan smiles and asks Shangjin if she can go in. Shangjin didn't refuse. Ziyuan came up and asked Shangjin, "Are you okay?" But Shangjin has a lot of mixed feelings right now. He says he doesn't know. He didn't even know what he was doing in this church. "I don't even know if what I'm doing is the right thing." Ziyuan rushed to comfort Shangjin. She said she did the same thing the first time she executed a scumbag. "I also think like you. What if the person I killed is innocent? It's not just you and me who feel this way. All the believers here are the same. But we must not let them off the hook for that. There are too many cunning people in this world. People who can't be punished by law. There are a lot of people who have committed crimes and not been punished." While talking, Ziyuan recalled some memories. It turns out Ziyuan also had a painful experience before he blacked out. Yes, Ziyuan was raped. This woman who made an 80-year-old man unable to hold his gun. She is actually a super sick woman. She doesn't even blink when she cuts her loin. But she's actually a poor person. Her name is Ziyuan. She was raped by the school's senior when she was 14, but when she took the bastard to court, the bastard was acquitted. Ziyuan's world came crashing down after that. The story of the rape went viral in the school. Everyone is calling her dirty, accusing her of having no shame. After that, Ziyuan, who couldn't stand the pressure, chose to drop out of school, even when the withdrawal was organized. The teacher also made a mockery of Ziyuan. The scumbag who raped Ziyuan ended up looking more like a victim. As time passes, Ziyuan became more and more disheveled. She smokes and drinks all day long. Just when Ziyuan thought it might all be her fault, the only sister who cared about her called her. The two had a dinner date. At the dinner table, Ziyuan told his sister about his rape. She was shocked. She immediately proposed to Ziyuan to take her to her church. Her church is called the Universal Church of Eternal Life. The purpose of this church is to take the place of the police in the private execution of all the scum of society. A desperate Ziyuan agrees to his sister's invitation, so the sister takes Ziyuan to meet a missionary in the church. As soon as they met, Sis asked the missionary for help. She asked for his help in executing the brute who had violated Ziyuan, but the missionary said, to be executed according to the rules of their church. Waiting for the missionary to finish briefing Ziyuan on the rules, Ziyuan decisively agrees, and with tears in her eyes, she begged the missionaries to help her execute the bastard. Afterwards, on a stormy night, the missionary and sister help Ziyuan catch the brute. All that was needed was for Ziyuan to go over there and take off the hood. Make sure it's the same guy who violated her. But when Ziyuan saw the brute's face, she tackled him straight to the ground. Then she grabbed him by the neck. Ziyuan just cried as he increased the strength in his hands, until the beast was strangled until he couldn't breathe. Ziyuan slowly stopped. Eventually, with the help of the missionary and her sister, the beast was buried in a wasteland. Ziyuan was reborn from that day on. Just now, Ziyuan told Shangjin all about it. Shangjin's heart fluctuated after hearing this, and this time, Ziyuan stands up. Then she slowly approaches Shangjin. Shangjin, you just did the right thing. I really appreciate it. Then Ziyuan took off his coat, and then she took off the rest of the fabric. Shangjin is pressed directly under the bed. Then she did something shy with Shangjin. At the same time, the creature's body began to mutate after eating the rapist. Ziyuan finally gave herself to him. After a long 3 minutes of in-depth communication, Shangjin sits up with a satisfied look on his face. Ziyuan is also very understanding. She just packed up and prepared to leave. It's not sticky at all. And then Shangjin is ready to go out. He's going to see his buddy Shanyu, the monster. But Shangjin just opened the door to his buddy's room. He realized that he was wrapped in a pool of blood. It's similar to what happened when he became a cocoon. But this time, the shape of the mutation is much larger. The whole room is filling up. The chairman of the church who received the news rushed over. The missionaries and Ziyuan also arrived on the scene quickly. But Ziyuan and Shangjin, who had experienced the last mutation, didn't panic either. They explained to the chairman that it's the monster's self-evolution. The chairman of the board is confused. They don't know. In fact, only the scientists peeking through the door discovered the secret. At the same time, in the prison where the church holds its prisoners, a 15-year-old girl is now starting to mutate as well. This girl is a lunatic in the eyes of others. The church put her in jail because she killed her own parents. The people who imprisoned her treated her like a psychopath. They called her a heartless piece of shit. But she's still grinning wickedly with her teeth bared when she's called out. And that she shouldn't kill her own parents, but the parents of men. The man breaks out in a cold sweat when he hears this. He puts down her lunch, and then turned around and left, waiting for the girl to get her meal. She had only taken one bite when she felt that the flavor of the meal was so different from the past. It's hard to even swallow a mouthful of rice. This anorexia is the precursor to becoming a monster. Soon it's nighttime. Shangjin is still in his room reminiscing about how Ziyuan serviced him during the day. Suddenly the doorbell rings. It's the believer who brought the girl food during the day. He told Shangjin in a panic. There's something wrong with the woman in the cell. Shangjin immediately rushed to the dungeon with him. At this point, the girl's body has become 2.5 times bigger than usual. Shangjin was also a bit shocked when he saw. He slowly approaches the cell door. Wanted to care for the girl, but Shangjin hadn't finished her sentence yet. The girl's head suddenly turned around, and then a huge abyssal mouth came at Shangjin. It's almost the end. Shangjin is scared out of his wits. Seeing this, the minions rushed over to check on the situation. They also asked Shangjin if he wanted to call the monster to take care of it. But the monster is still in its evolutionary stage. Shangjin can't do anything about it now. Look at the mutated woman. Shangjin decides it's best to wait until the monster has evolved. The next day, Shangjin was worried and asked the scientist to check it out. After a while of analysis by the scientist, he determined that the girl had a genetic mutation as well. But the scientists thought it was a little strange. It's because the girl is evolving too fast. She became a monster in less than a day. So he turns to Shangjin and asks him what he's going to do about it. But Shangjin said he would wait until the monster woke up and let the monster decide. Speaking of which, Shangjin told the scientist about the monster turning into a cocoon. And then the scientist said he wanted Shangjin to show him. Soon the two of them reached the monster's room. The scientist rushed forward to take a closer look. But the conclusion was similar to Shangjin's. Scientists say that the creature is now in secondary mutation. It's like an insect's cocoon. After the fact, Shangjin gathered the missionaries and Ziyuan and the chairman to discuss what to do about the mutated woman in the dungeon. The missionary said he would just kill the woman. But Ziyuan says we can watch for a while. The chairman has no comment. He just asked Shangjin what he's going to do about it. But Shangjin's final decision was the same as Ziyuan's, and decided to feed the woman something to try. Shangjin didn't know that his decision almost led to the end of the church. This is the smartest pig I've ever seen, with an IQ of at least 180. It's about to be fed to a monster. The little brother holding him is impatient to get him to the monster's cage. The two decide that one of them will open the gate and the other will release the pigs. But the two have just opened the gate, and the pig starts backing up like it can realize it's going to be eaten, all four hooves stomping back. The man who opens the door urges the hogs to hurry up. But he hasn't finished his sentence. The creature ate his head. Ketchup splattered all over his face. The pig starts hissing like a madman. And the little man is so scared, his limbs have gone rigid. Piggy took the opportunity to break away from little brother and frantically ran wildly towards the door. In the next second, the little brother's head was eaten as well. Immediately after that, the monster was released like this. The whole church became her cafeteria. Whenever she sees something alive, she eats it in one bite. A few of the church's security personnel rushed to surround the monster. The news quickly reached Shangjin. Ziyuan also arrived in time. And that's when it happened. The monster has attacked again. Seeing the monster eat people like this, the brainwashed two are still wondering if this guy is their god. Ziyuan, who is still sensible, picks up his weapon on the ground and prepares to go up and fight the monster. Shangjin suddenly pulled Ziyuan back. Shangjin said it's too dangerous to let Ziyuan pass, but this monster is too strong. A few of the men can only watch as their companions are swallowed one by one. And yet, at this most desperate of times, the church's missionaries came. He was a mercenary. While the monster is still eating people, the missionary's brow tightens. Then he builds up the great axe in his hand, and then he starts sprinting towards the creature. And finally, a leap, a direct axe chop. But the monster actually used the strong man that had not yet been swallowed in its mouth to block the missionary's fatal blow. Before the missionary's backlash ends, the creature opens its gaping mouth and bites him, though the missionary dodges it. But the monster's next blow follows suit, but this time it also misses. Shangjin saved the missionaries. Shangjin said the monster was too dangerous, signaling the missionary to hide with him. The corners of the missionary's mouth turn up slightly at the sound of his voice. Smiling, he tells Shangjin that it's okay. Then he turns around and prepares to fight the monster. He charges at the creature with his bare hands, and then he raises his already wounded arm and slams it into the monster. The monster didn't hesitate. It took the blow with its mouth. But that's just the missionary's plan. And then he kicked at the axe in the ground. The axe spins 2.5 times in the air after. It's just caught by the missionary's right hand. And with a roar of rage, he slashes at the monster. The creature can't get its mouth shut in time. It can only take the blow. The missionary throws 2 more punches at the monster. The creature is wounded. The limbs begin to tremble, and eventually just collapsed in front of the missionary. Looking at the paralyzed monster, the missionary is just about to breathe a sigh of relief. But the next second the creature starts squirming again. Then her eyes snapped open and she bit at the missionary again. Just as the missionary was about to be engulfed by the monster as well, the doors of the church suddenly opened. A shirtless man walked in. He walked straight toward the creature. This man is an exhibitionist. He never leaves the house without his clothes on. There was an unexpected appearance of a monster in the church just now. The church's 7 or 8 security guards couldn't control her. People were scared and ran away. And the man actually approached her after seeing the monster, facing the bloody mouth coming from the front. He doesn't panic. He even put his hand directly into the creature's mouth, and then proceeded to pet the creature as a pet, and the monster became as obedient as a cat. It turns out that this man was once a monster like her. He stayed home and played video games for half a month. In half a month, he didn't drink a sip of water or eat a bite of food. Eventually, he had a genetic mutation that turned him into a monster. After he became a monster, he began to mutate again. Eventually, after 2 transformations, he returns to human form. His name was Shanyu. He's Shangjin's best friend. After a few strokes of Shanyu's hand on the creature is calming down. All of the worshippers began to kneel down. At this moment, Shanyu finally became the true molar of the church. But only Shangjin knew. The Shanyu in front of me has changed. Afterwards, Shangjin came to Shanyu's guest room alone. As soon as they met, Shangjin asked him if he was still Shanyu. He also asks Shanyu if he remembers anything that happened between the time he turned into a monster and now. But Shanyu says he's still the same Shanyu. But in a way, now he may not be the same Shanyu. About the memories, Shanyu says he remembers everything from before. But now he's got a lot of other people's memories in his head. Shangjin didn't ask any more questions after that. Now he's going to visit the missionary. After the previous battle, the missionary's left arm is gone, but everything else is fine. And yet others are still asking Shangjin about Lord Molar. Shangjin explains, the Lord Molar that they see now is actually his own good brother, but he doesn't know why he went from monster to human again. Ziyuan interrupted him. She indicated that for them believers, All they need is Lord Molar. The missionary smiles back and says that whatever Shanyu looks like is the Molar lord of his heart. Shangjin was confused after hearing their words. He didn't know whether to treat Shanyu as a good brother or a god now. Night. A church servant goes to bring dinner to Shanyu. The servant has just entered the room. Shanyu signaled for the maid to come over with the food. The unknown servant did as he was told. Wait for the servant to get closer. Shanyu suddenly turns his head violently. The servant's jaw nearly dropped when she saw Shanyu's face. He doesn't have time to react before a tentacle-like object penetrates his body. In the end, the servant became Shanyu's dinner. After the meal, Shanyu went to the dungeon. He walked right up to the creature's cell and unlocked the cell door. The creature turns around when it hears the noise, but then Shanyu suddenly grabs his arm, and then he pulls. Shanyu's arm is actually ripped off like cheese. It's like he can't feel pain. Backhanded his arm right into the creature's mouth. This man's pet is a man-eating monster with a gaping mouth and an ugly face, and he feeds the monster on his own arm. As long as the creature is hungry, he'll rip off his own hand, and then he'd hand it to the monster to eat raw, and his hand will grow back in a few seconds. He's very fond of the creature. To be able to wake up and see the monster every day, he's going to take the monster straight home. The believers around him are dumbfounded, but Shanyu was like a spring breeze. But he doesn't know that he's being watched by a policewoman for this madness. With Shanyu taking the monster up the elevator, the policewoman rushes to the safe passage, just as Shanyu was about to return to the room with the monster. Just in time to be photographed by a policewoman. The policewoman had been watching the church for a long time. Do you remember the cop who broke into the house when Shangjin was still at home? He was supposed to be investigating Shangjin's murder. But after his death, his assistant, the policewoman, was in charge. And then when Shangjin and Ziyuan were on the run, she's been investigating Shangjin. At that time from the surveillance video, she saw Shangjin and Ziyuan taking the monster up the mountain, so she went all the way to the junkyard. It's in the same dark room Shangjin used to house the monsters. She found an arm and blood stains all over the room. Since then, she's profiled Shangjin as a prime suspect. Later, according to roadside surveillance, she quickly checked back into that little church, but that church was ready to be torn down. And then she went along with it and learned from the demolition crew. The name of the church is Cosmic Eternal Life. To find evidence of Shangjin's murderous absconding, she went straight to Shangjin's main church as a believer. Not only did she capture the scene of the monster eating people in the church earlier, she also discovered that the church had a cell for prisoners, and many people were imprisoned in them. Back to the present. While the policewoman risks her life to take pictures, suddenly a voice calls out to her. It turns out to be the same girl who made Shanyu eat her father earlier. The girl said in a low tone, "Sister, did you take a picture of Lord Molar?" At once the policewoman was scared out of her wits. She thought that her police's identity was discovered by the girl, yet the next moment the girl smiles again. She smiled and said that she was actually just like her, trying to sneak a peek at Lord Molar. Hearing this, the policewoman officer agreed with the girl. She joked that she didn't expect to be caught by the girl, and then the girl says she'll keep the secret with the policewoman, because the girl can't let her mom find out she snuck in to see Lord Molar, or she'll be scolded by her mother. And then the girl and the policewoman just left the church's apartment building. On the way, the policewoman asks where the girl's mom is. The girl says it's time for the evening service at the church. Mom should be here soon. The girl found her mom just as the words left her mouth. As soon as she saw her mom, the girl jumped at her. The policewoman and the girl's mom exchange a few brief pleasantries. The mom suggests that the policewoman go to church with them. The policewoman didn't refuse and went with them to church. Within a few moments the church was filled with worshippers. The service is about to begin. But this time, the hosts are Shangjin and Shanyu. Shanyu, standing at the podium, noticed the mother and daughter right away. He then smiled an evil grin, and the believers kept shouting slogans of judgment against the wicked. Shanyu announces the start of the trial. Then Shanyu took off his clothes. Next thing you know, Shanyu's back suddenly sprouted a few squirming pustules. Next, the pustule turned into wings with a swish. This man stood on a podium and stripped naked in front of thousands of people. The men and women at the podium are silent, but that's just the appetizer. The man's back suddenly sprouted pus. Next, the pustule turned into a blood-red wing. As the corners of the man's mouth rose slightly, the wings begin to bend in one direction. Then the wing twists into a tentacle. It went straight through a middle-aged woman off stage. The woman's ketchup splatters the girl sitting next to her, and then she's lifted up by the tentacles. The girl was the woman's daughter. The mother and daughter looked at each other for the last time, and then the woman was dragged from the air onto the back of the man on the stage. The wings are holding the woman in place, accompanied by a cold grunt from the man. The woman has become the man's midnight snack, and instead of calling the police, the people on the stage all cheered. It turns out that the people on stage were all members of a church called the Universal Church of Eternal Life, and the man on stage was the god of their church. His name is Shanyu. The purpose of this cosmic eternal cult is to privately execute all the scum of society behind the backs of the police. After the woman was executed, her daughter breaks down. the tears won't stop flowing. But Ziyuan saw them, so Ziyuan decided to have a chat with her. Ziyuan talked to the girl about Shanyu. Yet Shanyu has killed both her parents. And yet the girl is still crying that Shanyu is precious to her. It's a god in her heart. Ziyuan also took the opportunity to said Shanyu was dedicated to guarding all their followers, and that killing the girl's mom just now was her salvation, and that her mom is now comfortably ensconced in heaven. Simple girl just got brainwashed by Ziyuan. In the end, the girl accepted reality with a bitter smile. At the same time, Shanyu is now taking a relaxing bath. Suddenly Shangjin breaks in. He comes to Shanyu's bathroom door and angrily asks Shanyu why he's killing people, and he asks him what happened to the wings on his back. At this Shanyu absently got up and said, "Don't worry about what happened to my body. Haven't we always been good friends? And that woman, I carried out the execution because it was necessary for her to be executed. Why? She didn't commit a crime. Shangjin, I told you, she was executed because it was necessary for me to execute her." At this point, Shanyu continues with some impatience. "If you have nothing to say, just leave. You have a church to attend to." Shangjin didn't say anything after that. He turned around and was ready to leave. As he left, he thought to himself, the Shanyu now is definitely not the Shanyu he knew. It's time for the next day. Several members of the church were summoned to Shanyu's room. As the believers entered the living room one by one, Shanyu slowly emerges from the bedroom, smiling and greeting the devotees. Several see this and kneel. Shanyu hurriedly signaled for them to get up. He then sat down in his chair, ready to inform the few of the purpose of calling them here. Just when a few people thought they could do something for Shanyu, Shanyu teasingly said, "The reason I called you here is because you're going to be judged." As soon as the words fell, a giant monster comes out of the next compartment. This sick man has a monster for a wife. He can't stop petting it every day, but the fodder that feeds that monster is the living. So he tricked a few of the living into coming home, and then he released the monster. Everyone's scalp exploded at the sight of the monster. They're running for the door as fast as they can, but when I got to the door, it wouldn't open. The door had been locked from the outside by two strong men. They wouldn't open the door, no matter how hard they knocked. One of the women subconsciously turned her head, and the next thing she knew, she was being eaten alive by the creature. The woman's ketchup is splattered all over the others. The whole room has been turned into an inferno. The man sits back and watches happily. The man's name is Shanyu. He is the god of this universal eternal church, and the unlucky ones who are eaten by monsters are his followers. Soon the news of the disappearance of the believers spread throughout the church. Ziyuan and the others thought there was a security problem at the church, so they set up a staff at the front door of the church. Now everyone leaving the church had to get an exit pass. At this point, the policewoman officer who's been lurking in the church is going to take a trip. She wanted to take the little girl with her and get out of the way, but the brainwashed girl wanted to stay in the church. She says she'll always be by Shanyu's side to protect him. As the two were discussing this, Ziyuan approached them. She learned that the female officer was now planning to go away for a few days. Ziyuan offered to take care of the girl for her, and informed the policewoman of the recent security upgrades at the church. And then Ziyuan took out an exit pass from his person. She changed the name and handed it to the policewoman. Then the policewoman left. As she left, the policewoman thought to herself, now the church has suddenly tightened its security system. It must have something to do with the disappearance of those unlucky believers. It's nighttime. The girl tosses and turns in Ziyuan's bed. She asked Ziyuan, was her mother really being judged because she needed to be judged by Shanyu? Ziyuan answered the girl affirmatively, and she added that Shanyu must have had his reasons for doing so. Despite what Ziyuan says, she has mixed feelings. At the same time, Shangjin has found the scientist again. Shangjin asks the scientist what he thinks of Shanyu now. The scientists first said, the odds are that the recently disappeared believers were eaten by Shanyu, or eaten by the monster in the dungeon. And he analyzes it to Shangjin in terms of Shanyu being a genetic mutation. Shanyu's need for food, i.e. living people, is now several times greater than before, and thus it can be proven. Shanyu has now completed its evolution after gene mutation. The scientist then gave Shangjin the example of the mule. The mule is a cross between a horse and a donkey, because they can't reproduce. So generally we don't categorize such things as species, but once the mule is able to reproduce, we'll recognize it as a species. Because the species classification, the first thing to consider is reproduction. All the mutations that I've studied have been males, so they can't reproduce. But the last monster we saw in the dungeon was supposed to be female, right? If this isn't just a single-sex genetic mutation, but one that can reproduce, then they're no longer mutations, they're new species. So after all that you should have thought of that, right? My take on it is, could they be preparing to breed? Suppose you were asked to do shy things to this little cutie. What would you choose to stab her in the mouth with? After Shangjin's in-depth conversation with the scientist, he had just returned home when the missionary came looking for him. He's going to ask Shangjin to go out for a walk. He even called Ziyuan on the way. The three of them just chatted away in the park. Suddenly the missionary talked about the recent disappearance of believers from the church. He also heard that they were all executed by Shanyu. Shangjin said he didn't know either, but Ziyuan suggested we go and ask Shanyu. Shangjin didn't say no. So the three of them went straight to Shanyu's room. Shangjin asked Shanyu directly, "Do you execute churchgoers in your room every day?" He also bluntly asked, "Why do you execute believers instead of prisoners in the church?" But Shanyu said coldly, "So, was the hardware store guy we killed the first time also a prisoner prepared by the church? And I don't think the glasses guy at the convenience store and the cop who broke into the house were prepared by the church, were they?" Shanyu's words left Shangjin speechless. Ziyuan even came over to smooth things over. The church is in a state of panic. However, Shanyu interrupts her before she can finish her sentence. "Ziyuan, I didn't ask you to talk, and I'll take care of my own business. These are not your business. Oh yeah, one more thing. Starting today, that little cutie is a molar lord, just like me. You'll have to give her the same treatment as me." As soon as the words were spoken, the creature stepped out of the attic. It seems to have a grudge against the missionary for cutting her down. After a glance at each other, she lunges at the missionary. Luckily, the missionary reacted in time to avoid the attack. But the monster wasn't about to let the missionary go. It's about to open its mouth again, ready to swallow the missionary. And just then, a chair hit the creature in the head. Shangjin hit it. The monster immediately turned his head and stared at Shangjin, and then she opened her mouth again. As the grand finale approaches, Shanyu interrupted the monster's attack. "That's enough. Stop it. Get out, all of you." The air in the room froze. None of the three said another word, turned and left in silence. Shanyu, on the other hand, has a weird look on his face. Afterwards, the three of them sat together again to discuss Shanyu. After analyzing the results with the scientists before, Shangjin hypothesizes to the two, what would happen to us if Shanyu wasn't a god? Hearing this, the missionary said, "Though it's not impossible, but if that were the case, we, as a church, would become a black sheep group. Unprecedented harmful group. Don't worry about it. It's not gonna happen." Ziyuan comforts them both. But Shangjin still had mixed feelings. On the other hand, the policewoman came out of the church and made a special private appointment with her top boss. That's the chief of police. She spoke directly to the chief about the general situation of the church, and she showed the chief all the footage of the monster eating people. But after watching the video, the chief deleted all the videos taken by the policewoman, and told the policewoman to leave the case alone. The policewoman was dumbfounded when the commissioner deleted the video of the monster. She gets angry and asks him what he means by that. But the chief says, "The chairman of this cosmic eternal life cult has long since paid off all the city's inspectors. Nothing can be done with just the two of them, and there's a good chance that the policewoman herself will be killed by the church." The policewoman was furious. She yelled at the chief, "So many people are fucking dead, don't you care?" But the chief's attitude remains the same, just re-emphasized that this was a church they couldn't afford to mess with. The policewoman turned her head and walked away. The commissioner tried to stop her, but the policewoman officer said she wanted to resign. She said she would never be a cop again. Then she left the scene in style. All she can think about now is saving the girl, and then kill Shangjin himself. At the same time, the monster Shanyu raised earlier has now turned into a cocoon. It's like a giant worm egg still pulsing. Just as Shanyu strokes his masterpiece with relief, just in time to be seen by a passing church servant, the servant couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. He rushed to tell Shangjin the news. The three of them discussed the countermeasures again. Ziyuan and Shangjin are beginning to have some doubts now. They're not sure if that monster is the same god as Shanyu or not. Seeing this, the missionary also took a direct stance. He said he felt that the creature was not a god at all, especially since the monster's eyes were more demonic. He thought back to his old days as a soldier. There was a teammate who killed for fun. He always had a strange look in his eye, just like that monster's eyes. The preacher laments, "If I could go back in time, I would have killed that demon myself." After listening to the missionary's story, Ziyuan said, "Ever since that monster appeared, the believers have been terrified until now. No matter what, that monster has to be dealt with somehow." Shangjin is also very sure about this. The missionary agreed immediately and analyzed that now, since the creature has turned into a cocoon, it should be non-aggressive now. So the three of them have come to a consensus. Prepare to strike late into the night. Soon it will be the third hour of the night. Shanyu is sleeping in his chair. The three of them just quietly break in. They've also brought tools for dealing with monsters. And then they came to the monster. Shangjin stabbed directly at the cocoon without a moment's hesitation. With a poof, the sound of the cocoon breaking instantly echoed through the room. Shangjin was also splattered with blood from the cocoon, but the cocoon is still twisting. The missionary prepares to strike again. He took out his old battle axe with his backhand, and then gathered strength in his right hand, splitting the cocoon into a bigger hole. This time the cocoon looks like it's been hit hard, and twists even more violently. And at that moment Shanyu was awakened by the sound he just made. Just as the missionary was about to do it again, Shanyu walks in from behind a few people. The three of them panicked. They hurriedly stopped their attack, and Shanyu panicked even more. He watched his masterpiece get splintered like this. He rushes toward the cocoon. As he approaches the cocoon, he reaches out with his right hand and tries to sew the opening in the cocoon closed. But the cocoon keeps spewing blood. Shanyu's face is dark, and that's when the missionary once again gripped his battle axe in his hand. But this time his target is Shanyu. But Shanyu had already sensed the danger. In an instant, a bloody wing spreads out from behind him. It sends the missionary flying several meters away. Shangjin and Ziyuan are both pinned to the wall by the bloodwing. Shanyu is very harsh. Shangjin and Ziyuan are being crushed to the point of suffocation. Shangjin struggles and tells Shanyu to let go of him. But Shanyu got impatient and told him to shut up, and said that if he said one more word, he would kill all three of them. Shanyu then proceeds to continue repairing the wound on the inner cocoon. He puts his hand right inside the cocoon. The cocoon is too badly wounded. Shanyu has to use his blood to cover his wounds first, and keep pumping his own blood into it. Shanyu then rips his arm right off, preparing to force the cocoon to stop bleeding with the bloodwing. Finally the cocoon stops spewing blood. Shanyu is also relieved at this point. Shanyu sits down with a sigh of relief. In the process, he pulls the bloodwings from the three of them as well. Shangjin has just caught his breath. Immediately said to Shanyu again, "Shanyu, that's a demon. We're doing this to protect you. You need to shut the fuck up. If any of you disobey me again, I'll kill you all. Shangjin, I let you go only because you are the last memory of me as a human being, not because I need you. Get the hell out of here." Shangjin froze at the sound of his voice. The missionary and Ziyuan didn't dare to say anything. They left the room with Shangjin in tow. Soon it was time for the next day. Shangjin was thinking about what Shanyu said last night while she was in the bathroom. He's now completely unsure of what Shanyu really is. And think about what that scientist said about genetic mutations. Shangjin has begun to feel, could Shanyu be just a man-eating monster now, too? Suddenly there's a sharp knock on the door, interrupting Shangjin, who was in a state of flux. The person who knocked on the door was the policewoman. Shangjin opens the door. The policewoman put a knife to his neck. Shangjin wanted to ask who she was, but the policewoman just ignored him. She just told him to be quiet and go back to the room. But the little girl saw it. At the same time, Shanyu's side is also moving. In the morning, the cocoon suddenly began to make a crunching sound, and then it kept twisting and turning like before. A few seconds later, a pair of human legs slipped out of the cocoon, and just like that, she walks naked in front of Shanyu. After the policewoman took Shangjin hostage, she tied Shangjin up again, and took out her cell phone and started recording. The policewoman angrily describes Shangjin's previous crimes. The more she talks, the more agitated she gets. Finally, she grabbed Shangjin's hair, asked him why he's killing people indiscriminately. Shangjin showed his hand. He said he didn't mean to kill anyone in the first place. It's just that I can't help it if I'm faced with a brother who's become a monster. At first I just wanted to feed the scum of society to Shanyu, but things got too big back there. You police are on to me. Just when I was about to have a nervous breakdown, I was approached by this follower of the cosmic eternal life cult. They worshipped Shanyu in monster form as a god, and for that reason, the church protected me and Shanyu. And there was a time when I thought Shanyu was a god, just like the believers in this church, but not anymore. I'd like you to help me. Shanyu must be stopped. Stop this madness from continuing any further. The policewoman froze when she heard this, and at this time, the door of Shangjin's room rang. It was Ziyuan and the missionary who answered the door. It's that little girl from before. She saw the policewoman holding Shangjin hostage and went to inform them. When the policewoman saw Ziyuan and the missionary coming in, she rushed to put a knife against Shangjin's neck, and threatened to kill Shangjin if they came any closer. Ziyuan and the missionary look confused. At this point Shangjin speaks up. He's signaling for the two of them to calm down. Says that now they have to team up with the policewoman to take on Shanyu and the monster he's raising. While he was talking he told the policewoman about the creature turning into a cocoon again. Seeing Shangjin begging herself like this, the policewoman chose to believe it. Shangjin was just as the four were about to reconcile. A churchgoer came knocking on the door. Shanyu wants to summon them and prepare them to meet the new Lord Molar. Shangjin panicked at that. He rushed to ask the policewoman to let himself go. He said he'd turn himself in after he finished with the monster and Shanyu, to prevent Shanyu from killing more people. The policewoman had to agree to Shangjin for the time being. In the meantime, the church has been filled with worshippers. The chairman of the board on the stage is announcing the words of welcome to the new Molar Lord, accompanied by the cheers of the believers on the stage. Shanyu walks onto the stage. There's a familiar figure behind him. It's the creature Shanyu raised that's evolved into a humanoid. Shangjin and the others have also arrived at high speed. Shangjin saw Shanyu and the woman and broke out in a cold sweat, because he saw that the woman's belly got bigger. Shangjin recalled what the scientist had told him. The scientists say Shanyu is preparing to reproduce, and now it looks like it's true. That's the way it is. Shangjin gave all three of them the conclusions that the scientists had speculated on. Finally Shangjin is also very firm. No matter what happens, he will stop Shanyu. Now let's turn to Shanyu. When he came on stage, he introduced the woman to the believers in a very serious way. Said she was the new Lord Molar. Immediately following Shanyu's announcement that the time for judgment has come, the believers on stage are still stupidly buzzing at this point. 2.5 seconds pass. The corners of Shanyu's mouth turn up slightly. Then the spine behind him starts to wriggle. In the next second, he actually spread his blood wings, reaching out to the believers on the stage. This time Shanyu has gone completely insane. He's going to eat 10,000 of them in one sitting. The corners of his mouth rose slightly. The spine of his back then began to wriggle. In the next second, a bloody wing appears. Then he switched the blood wing to tentacle form, stabbing directly at the believers on the stage. A few unlucky ones are instantly penetrated by the tentacles. Shanyu then hangs them up by their tentacles. The carnage begins in the air. All of a sudden the believers on stage began to get scared. They said Shanyu was just killing people indiscriminately. But Shanyu doesn't care. He controls his tentacles to hunt down the believers while alerting the woman beside him, signaling that she can now eat as many people as she wants. At that the woman stops pretending. After yelling, her neck instantly extends several meters. Then she splits herself into an oversized rift, and then it bites at the believers on the stage. A few believers were bloodied in less than half a second, and then the woman swallowed them all. On the one hand, there's the irrational Shanyu, and on the other hand, there's the horrible, monstrous woman. In an instant, the church has become an inferno. A few of the fastest believers tried to escape through the front door, but the door was already welded shut. The chairman of the board arranged it himself, as Shanyu's most loyal follower. He lost his humanity a long time ago, just after Shanyu killed an unknown number of believers. His good brother Shangjin finally stepped in to stop it. He signaled for Shanyu to stop. But before he can finish his sentence, Shanyu sends him flying. That was a heavy blow. Shangjin was sent flying several meters backwards. Without waiting for Shangjin to speak again, Shanyu said directly, "Didn't I warn you to stay out of my way?" Then Shanyu put his tentacle in front of Shangjin. Shanyu is killing this time. He's going to kill Shangjin. After saying his last goodbye to Shangjin, he attacked Shangjin. But Shangjin didn't die after the click, so the missionary arrived just in time. An axe split Shanyu's tentacles. The missionary has also come to his senses at this moment. He regrets the stupidity of what he did in assisting Shanyu, so he decided to take care of Shanyu himself. With that, he raises his battle axe again and charges at Shanyu. The missionary raised his tomahawk again, but this time his target is Shanyu. But before he can even get close to Shanyu, he's pinned to the ground by Shanyu's tentacles. The glasses were also shattered in their entirety. But the missionary wasn't about to give up. He got up and rebuked Shanyu. He's trying to get Shanyu to stop killing people, but Shanyu wouldn't listen. He was still slaughtering believers with the woman, and questioning the missionary. Did all the random people the church had killed before deserve to die? And everyone gets killed for the same reason anyway. I'm merely giving them an early trial now. The words just fell out of my mouth. The missionary then throws his axe at Shanyu. The axe hits Shanyu right in the thigh, but Shanyu doesn't look as if he can't feel the pain. The missionary was in a hurry. He loudly accused Shanyu again, saying that he was simply killing innocent people indiscriminately. He's a complete monster. But Shanyu replied to him playfully, "So you're not the one who brought me here? Is this not the image of the judgment of mankind that you had hoped to see?" Shanyu is interrupted by the sound of footsteps. It's the policewoman from before. She's got a steel pipe and she's about to sneak up on Shanyu. Although the pipe hit Shanyu right in the back of the head, Shanyu remains as unresponsive as before. The policewoman is frozen. She didn't have time to escape. Shanyu charges straight at her with a single tentacle. The policewoman was instantly knocked to the ground. Shanyu didn't hesitate, and disliked the tentacle on the policewoman's head. But just as he was about to launch his attack, Ziyuan came forward with his gun raised. She puts it directly against Shanyu's head, and then without hesitation, she fired. Shanyu fell to the ground. However, just when Ziyuan thought it was all over, suddenly one of Shanyu's tentacles lashed out. Ziyuan was jerked off stage by the blow and was badly injured. It was at this point that Shanyu, who had his head blown off, reacted again. After a squirming sound, Shanyu is back on his feet, and all his wounds have been healed. And then, Shanyu turns around and walks straight towards Ziyuan. This time Shanyu is really determined to kill, but just when Shanyu was about to kill Ziyuan, Shangjin interrupted him with a cry of stop. Shangjin rushes to pick up his pistol from the ground. Then without hesitation, he fires several shots at Shanyu. Shanyu is shot in the head again. Shangjin dares not hesitate and rushes to help Ziyuan up. They plan to escape from the church first. While Shanyu is still repairing his wounds, the four of them make their way out. At this point, the doors of the church are finally smashed open under the constant pounding of the faithful. All the believers are fleeing frantically as soon as the door opens. Only the chairman of the board remains calm as he orders his men. Tell him to put up some barricades to block the crowd. At the same time, the other monster in the church has gone kill crazy. As long as it catches a person, it will eat him in one bite. But even in the face of such an inferno, there's a little girl who's just sitting there calmly. The policewoman rushes over and tells her to leave. But the girl said she didn't want to go. She wants to stay here with Shanyu. Without any choice, the policewoman picked her up in her arms. The little girl, however, is furious. She told the policewoman to hurry up and let herself go, in order to save the girl who has been brainwashed. The policewoman doesn't explain much. She rushed off to join the missionary, but when Shangjin and the others reached the gate, they found it locked. No matter how much the believers shouted, a few of the chairman's men at the door just wouldn't listen. Ziyuan suggested that they could leave through a secret passageway only accessible to their senior staff. The four of them had no choice but to take a step forward, and that's how they managed to get out of the church. Suddenly, a car approached, and it stopped right in front of Shinjin and the others. So it's the scientist. He's signaling for the crowd to get on the bus, not daring to hesitate for half a second. Everyone rushes to the car, just driving to the exit. The scientist just realized that the gate has been barricaded. Shangjin then signaled for the scientist to rush through without hesitation. The scientist is forced to take a gamble. With the gas pedal pressed to the floor, the car just came barreling toward the gate. The barricade was knocked away with a clunk. The crowd survived, but now it's basically all wounded. We need to find a place to stay first. Shangjin suggests going to the hospital first, but Ziyuan said that the chairman is now in league with Shanyu. The hospital is probably not safe either. So Ziyuan suggested, why don't we go to the junkyard where they first hid from the police? Then it's nighttime. They managed to escape to the junkyard. It's the same as before, but now it's Shanghai who takes care of Ziyuan. The two of them chatted about recent events in the darkness of the night. Looking at the bonfire in front of him, Shangjin can't help but repent. It turns out that there is no such thing as a god. We're all just a bunch of criminals. The church on the other side. The chairman of the board of directors has imprisoned all of them in the basement, preparing for the next massacre. And that's when Ziyuan and the missionary realized that we really killed a lot of innocent people during this period. We're really no different than that demon. A lifetime of serving the wrong god, setting judgment on our own, hurting a lot of people. In the end we become evil ourselves. At this point, the police came outside after settling the sleeping girl. Then she came towards us with her gun. Ask where the gun came from. Ziyuan said to her, it's from the cop who lost his life earlier. I'm sorry. At those words, she walked straight towards Ziyuan. She went up to Ziyuan and slapped him in the face. With tears in her eyes, she said, you damned murderer. What a psychopath. Sorry, do you realize what you've done? Getting innocent people killed. Can you still say you're sorry? Blame it on that sick pseudo-religion. Blame it on your stupid faith. I was trying to persuade, but she shrugged it off. Let go. How dare you come over here and touch me? Are you ashamed? Ziyuan was silent for a long time and said slowly, what else? What do you want me to do? Am I informed? The only one who reached out to me when I was going to end myself was the church. But how could I have known that it was a pseudo-religion? If only you cops had punished the guy who assaulted me at the time. How did I end up in this situation? I should have just hung myself. That way there wouldn't be this pseudo-religion. And there wouldn't be that crazy molar-toothed lord. The time to hurt so many people in the name of judgment. I've never felt any guilt so far, because it's the right thing to do. Because I'm doing the right thing. But when I realized it was the wrong thing to do, I began to hear the voices of those I had harmed before. My head was about to explode with guilt. But what can I do? When she finished, everyone fell silent, and the preacher slowly got up and said, we will atone for our sins. We have all released a wrong God and so committed irreparable sins. Of course we're going to atone for our sins. But let's at least take care of the monsters ourselves. Those are the monsters we created. We are responsible for this. The missionary has finished. Just as the police were about to question us about what to do about it, the professor rushed out. Guys, check this out. So these monsters are popping up all over the world now. This proves that this evolution is happening all over the world at the same time. But that's not the most important thing. In the middle of a video, the monster just stomped on the bonfire, and it set its whole body on fire. If you ask me what that means, the last time the monster was in cocoon form, I went to take a little specimen of tissue, and then analyzed this composition. It was discovered that the monster's skin layer is overwhelmingly composed of fat. These guys are hard to put out once they've been set on fire. They're even more flammable than coal. And in the video that's currently online, all the mutations seem to be in males. Remember the mule story I told you earlier? If I'm right about this, then all those genetic mutations that are happening now could be occurring to protect females that can reproduce. In other words, like soldier ants, they're protecting the only queen. In other words, those monsters will run here to protect the queen, in case the mutated individuals manage to reproduce. I don't know what would happen. After all is said and done, the crowd is ready to start moving, because this is no longer the time for small talk. Let's get going anyway. Then they started gathering things to make weapons, and that's when it happened. It's actually snowing in these June skies. It's as if the heavens are saying goodbye to us all. After a while, everything is ready. The crowd is starting to move out, and the professor watches the car go from behind. The girl seemed to know that everyone was leaving. The girl who walked out of the room also understood everything. Her mother was not judged. She cried out loud. At this point in the car I was thinking, what have I been chasing all this time? I don't know what I've been believing in and acting for so far, but what I can be sure of is, there are a lot of people who have been hurt because of me, and now is the time to make it right. After all this, it's time to turn yourself in. On the other side, Shanyu once again ordered several people to be brought to the room, feeding the woman again. By this time, we're also downstairs at the church. The woman is about to go into labor after devouring several people. Shanyu said to her, just hold on a little longer. It's almost done. The world is coming to us. Our children will be the new humans, at the top of the food chain. And our group arrived at the church after taking care of the guards at the gate. I said to the crowd, there is a place we need to go before we go to Shanyu, to find those people in the underground prison. Those people are innocent. So we headed for the underground prison. The security guards were also starting to panic under Shanyu's tactics with the other monster. They're starting to talk to the people next to them about what to do, and we were eavesdropping on their conversation in the stairwell. Ziyuan is going to go up and talk to him, because their hearts have been shaken. Ziyuan came to them and exchanged words and got the key, opened the door to the underground prison. Subsequently, all of them started to run away from this hellhole in a frenzy. At that moment, Shanyu, who was upstairs, also saw the scene of those people running away. After a while, from the mouths of those security personnel, one of the monsters is nearing the end of its labor. Those monsters are out of touch with the human condition. That means if we fail this time, the consequences will be disastrous. So it has to work. Just as the elevator reaches the 7th floor, Shanyu appears in the hallway, heavily armed. I reacted instantly. Press the elevator door immediately. And Shanyu is slowly approaching. Just as the door is about to close, Shanyu gives a wry smile. Next, only to see his tentacles go straight through the elevator door. Just as the crowd was in shock, Ziyuan was the first to set the crafted weapon on fire, and inserted it into his tentacle. The flames ignited the entire tentacle in an instant, but it seems Shanyu already knew about our plan. He looked at us playfully and said, "You guys didn't really think you could destroy me with fire, did you?" He hasn't finished talking yet. The missionary takes a well-made Molotov cocktail, lights it, and smashes it at him, but it's knocked aside by his tentacles. And just then, the cop charged with a lit weapon. The next second, but he reacted to it. The tentacle hurtles towards him, but he dodges it. But the next moment his body was pierced through. Shanyu teased, "Why would I want to take out humans? Is it for the judgment? Is it because of the need for those nutrients? No. The answer is that you are all inferior. Don't you humans kill ants for no reason? Wasn't it because they were weaker than you? Is that why you can destroy them without guilt? Me, too, because you are inferior to me. I have evolved into a higher being than you, and my children will be born in a more perfect form. So isn't it only natural to destroy those who stand in my way? Of course I'm going to stomp all the ants that try to climb on my feet." But at this time, Shanyu didn't understand the truth that the villain dies because of talking too much. In the next second, the police officer hit him with a Molotov cocktail, right in the center. Fuel instantly spreads throughout Shanyu's body. The police shouted, "What are you waiting for? Light the fire." The missionary reacted immediately, took a lit flask and threw it at him. In the next second, the cop was instantly thrown to the side. The missionary once again picks up his lighted axe and prepares to strike him with a deadly blow. At the same time, Ziyuan follows suit, but the missionary only cut off one of his hands. He was then knocked to the ground by his tentacles. But the next moment I charged again. The ignited weapon pierced his body in an instant. The fire immediately spreads to his entire body. I grabbed the axe next to me and slashed at the tentacles holding the missionary. Rescued the unconscious missionary. Ziyuan grabbed his weapon and went in search of another monster. Ziyuan then went to the monster and prepared to kill it. Suddenly the chairman of the board rushed at her with a vase in his hand. Ziyuan reacted by knocking him to the ground, but he catches her by the ankle, and I helped the missionary to come to this place. The creature took advantage of this lull and immediately jumped off the building. Seeing that the monster was only slightly injured, they decide to go after it. But they didn't realize that Shanyu, engulfed in flames, was still alive. He's coming toward us. Seeing Shanyu in the flames getting closer and closer, my mind began to flash wildly with memories of Shanyu. I said out loud, "Stop it, Shanyu. It's not too late. Stop, because so many of us have died. So stop. Look at your body." But Shanyu came at me even more furiously as if he hadn't heard me. I gripped my weapon and pointed it at him. There was no movement, but Shanyu rushes toward the weapon. Eventually, he slowly loses consciousness as he looks at each other. So this is how it's going to end up. You used to be my best friend. If we hadn't caused all this trouble in the first place, would it have turned out differently? I know it's no use regretting it now. We've both committed irreparable crimes, and for that we must take responsibility in any way we can. And on the other side, It's repeated on the news. Strange life forms are appearing all over the world. Citizens are urged to evacuate to the nearest emergency shelter. When we caught up with the escaping monster, we found out that the creature had already given birth. The newborn escaped to the other side. Maybe I'll never be able to take responsibility for the crimes I've committed, but I can't give up just because I can't. I've lost my friends and I've lost myself. All I can do is to get rid of the missing monster myself. Well, that's the end of this manhwa. Thanks for watching.